Good, good evening and welcome to the inaugural session of BIC Films in collaboration with Toto Funds the Arts. Returning to the first beat, Phir Se Sampe Ana. Under this platform, films will be screened in advance and will culminate with a discussion with the filmmakers, as is the case today. Joining us today are director and producer of the film, Surabhi Sharma, and producer Tejaswini Niranjana. Surabhi and Teju will be in conversation with Bindu Malini. Before I hand over to Bindu Malini, a few quick instructions. If you're not on our mailing list and would like to sign up, you can do that by visiting our website, or you can follow us on our social media channels, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. The full bios of today's panelists will be shared via the chat box that you see at the bottom of your screen. Next to the chat box is the Q&A box through which you can enter the questions for today's panelists. Thank you so much, Teju, Surabhi, and Bindu for doing this for us. And with that, over to you, Bindu.
Thank you, Raghu. Good evening to all of you, and hi, Surabhi and Teju. It's great to see you both after how many months? Now 6 months, but virtually. The last we saw was when we were part of Sat Sat. And to those who are here, I know Teju and Surabhi through this project, which is sort of Teju's brainchild, called Sat Sat. And that has been a musical conversation between India and China in the last 3 years. And through that, I got to meet Surabhi also. To kickstart this evening session, I know most of the audience here, they must have already seen the film. And so maybe a bit of background to this film will be a good place to start. So Teju, I know that it was sort of, it had its birth from you, and then Surabhi joined you on this sort of a parallel journey, let's say. So can you talk a little bit about what is this about? What is the background behind this film?
I'm going to try and be short, but I just want to thank BIC in particular and the TFA for being kind enough to start their film series, screening series with our film. So thanks from both me and Surabhi. It's actually, our collaboration goes back a long way. And we had earlier collaborated on a film called Jahaji Music, which was a journey through the Caribbean. It was about Indian music in a sense as it travels into the Caribbean and what comes out of it. And we had such a wonderful time doing that after we made the film, I had to actually rewrite the book on which the film was based. So I said, this is getting too complicated. Our friendship was only getting deeper. We even share the same birthday. So it was like a friendship that was fated to, that we had to be together. So I said, well, next time we do something like this, why don't we start doing this together from day one? So we don't get into this mess where I have to rewrite everything that I have done before. Yes, good intentions and all that, but I've done a lot of that rewriting also, but this time for a different reason. I think we started talking about this in 2011. And I said, why don't we think of, I was part-time resident of Bombay. Surabhi was living there. I was learning Hindustani music. And I said, why don't we try and think of doing something which tracks the space that music occupies in Bombay city. This was exciting to Surabhi as well. And we said, let's try and raise some funds and let's try to do the research together. And we'll do the research through the shooting process. And I think this was, in some senses unusual for academic projects, that we normally get into the archive or, start writing something based on other words that other people, have produced. But in this instance, because I had this earlier rather amazing experience and knew that the film camera would open up vistas for me that, my own activity as a researcher in the archive would not, I somehow felt that this would be, for me, at the stage where I was exploring music, a more meaningful way of doing research into music. So this is where the filmmaker and I started working together, started locating the spaces that we would try and film, started locating people that would fill the footage, started walking around Bombay with other friends, with architects in particular, and so on. And through this fairly lengthy exploration over 3 or 4 years, and through the long drawn out shooting process, partly because of the usual problem of low budgets and cross-subsidizing and traveling back and forth and the usual stuff that happens with filmmaking in India and with research in India, we finally got this project together. And I think it's been amazing, but because I've already done my sort of book launch with BIC, I just want to show everyone that this is what I produced, Musicophilia in Mumbai, and I will talk some more about this a bit later. But what you have watched in the last few days is the film. You haven't read my book, so this is a plug for the book. But I think that we will now ask Surabhi to start speaking about the process, like from her side, what did it mean for her to engage in this collaboration?
Bindu, shall I?
Yes, please, Surabhi.
So yeah, again, just want to begin with a quick thank you to BIC and TFA in particular. I've been associated with TFA for very long, so it's just fantastic. And I'm a Bangalore lover, so I'm just happy that this is happening in Bangalore. To take off from what Teju has mentioned, so it's for me it was a very interesting revisiting of a neighborhood that I had known for a variety of reasons, not music at all. So it was a neighborhood that I was already somewhat familiar with, and I've had at different points of time in my life since college, different reasons to just walk around that neighborhood a lot. Sometimes randomly and sometimes with a very specific purpose for some other research or the other. When Teju's project began, she always makes me jump into the deep end. I'm not anybody who's well versed in music. I'm not a musician. I'm a very uninformed but enthusiastic listener, and but I still bravely jumped into, in a sense, the pool. And we began by just walking around that area a lot. Like literally, we would stop at a roadside tea vendor and ask, which are the music shops, because I knew that area, we knew that area was very important for our research. So it was just walking around, and then slowly the space started opening out to us. And we began doing these interviews, which with people that Teju identified, people that I identified, people that found us, people that we found. And we filmed these interviews. And these were Ajay Narona, the cinematographer, and Suresh Rajamani, the sound recordist. They were with us when we started filming these interviews. Ajay is actually in the audience today. We filmed these interviews, and while filming, I had no idea what this film was. I never shoot interviews with a camera on the tripod, just shooting people talking. It was driving Ajay crazy, it was driving me crazy, but I said, these interviews, let's treat them as research interviews, and let's just film them neatly, nicely as research interviews, not the way I would shoot an interview for a film. And then because the conversations were so rich and so vibrant and so alive, I decided to, so that I'm not tempted to make the interview the format for the film, I promptly, along with Teju, we decided together to put up all our research interviews on this online archive called Padma, pad.ma. And everything, I never share my material when I'm shooting. I will only share it with people I trust. But this was one instance where literally we would shoot, and within the week or 2 weeks, it was already uploaded online, so that it was there in the world. And now I could not feel possessive about it. And it's totally unlike my usual practice. And that became a very interesting way to start imagining the film. I really did not know what the film would be until we went to the editing table. But I do know this, that when we started visiting these spaces where music used to be performed, or people's homes, musicians' homes, or the music schools. That was when I think, as a crew, Ajay, Suresh, and myself, there was something extremely powerful that was happening. But these were empty spaces. There was really nothing happening. Many of them were very tiny spaces. So we weren't, again, quite sure what we were filming. But that was when the film started talking back to me and to the three of us. Because Suresh was recording sound in a particular way. Ajay was seeing the space in a particular way. Through them, I was seeing the space in a particular way. And that was how our material came together. But these stories were just too beautiful to let go of. And then my editor, Diksha Sharma, who's unfortunately not going to be there, he's not in the audience, she came into the picture. Then she and I started dealing with this material. And then we started trying to figure out the structure. And the key thing about the structure was that I'm not a musician, but I understand that time is very central to the structure of music. So somehow the material that we had shot in these empty spaces was where I started finding an entry point into this film. And the other place where I found an entry point was, Tejo did so much work in collecting archival recordings of music recorded in these spaces. And while they were beautiful, I just felt they were too sentimental and too nostalgic. But every time we filmed a musician and we filmed the talim or the riyaz that they were doing, there again I found this idea of time and the present and history. And these were the very abstract ideas with which we began. This film is completely unlike anything I've done before in terms of its structure, but we literally threw out 60, 70 hours of visuals and just stayed limited to these spaces. And we had so much music, but we just stayed with that act of the teacher listening or the student listening or a rasik listening. And that was the starting point for the film, if it makes any sense.
Okay. Wow. So I think, okay, two things. One is that the fact that you said you're not a singer or you're not trained in music, but you're a listener. You're a lover of music. I was going to ask you about that because, I'll come into the treatment of the film. It has to do with the treatment or how I felt. I just want to reflect on what my experience was when I watched this film. But the other thing you said about the film started talking back to you. And that I feel is what comes through wonderfully in this entire film is there is a deep sense of listening. And that listening gets evoked. There's so much of tehrav that you bring into the film that I'm like almost, it's like I'm excited to see, okay, maybe something is going to happen, or am I going to miss out something? Even in that stillness, I felt there was so much to take in terms of details, or to kind of start witnessing oneself in the way that the film, if I was watching the film, I was beginning to become a witness of my own self watching the film. So this started happening in the film, or the experience of viewing the film, and it was very evocative for me. And now I'll come to the point of what it felt for me to watch this film was that as somebody who's been training or I have some training in Hindustani classical music, and this is the second time watching the film. I watched it twice, once long back, and at that time I saw these spaces as just spaces, structures. This time when I saw it, I went into the actual space that it contains, or the nothingness, so-called nothingness or emptiness was very filled with a lot of things, and you captured that. And so when you say that time frame, the way you just hold a frame, a still frame, but in motion, itself kind of started breaking Hindustani Khayal music, or the way I can approach music for my own self. So that's why I had this question saying it felt like a very, the treatment or the approach itself had something very close to how time works in Khayal Gaiki or in Hindustani. So did you have that in your conscious?
So what I had in my consciousness very clearly was that I'm not a knowledgeable audience of music. I'm not at all knowledgeable. And, but the material was provoking me to try and understand it. And the only way I know how to understand it is through film, right? So it was so I have never been more rigorous with my structure as I have in this film, precisely because I was trying to represent the world of music without describing it. I had enough material to describe the wonderful people, the wonderful spaces, the wonderful history, but that was information. That was information that was available. What I had to try and do is, as you said, evoke a sense of what these spaces held. That of course they held memories, and they did hold nostalgia, and they were empty shells just now, but they also held erasures. They held entire traditions that have got wiped out. Now, how do I do that without describing? And so how could I use the idea of time is central to how music moves. So how could I use that to structure my film? And I'll actually tell you where it became clear for me when we were shooting in this little room called Trinity Club, where the greats have performed there, and the stories we had heard about that little chawl room was just mind-blowing. It was just fantastic, and it felt a lot like all of us indie filmmakers when we form our film clubs. 20 of us in one tiny room will put up a screen. It felt like that in the 20s of Bombay. And when we were there, it is such a tiny space that we didn't even know how to film it. You've taken 4 shots and you've pretty much covered the space. And that is when we realized that there were the windows and there were these mirrors. And there was the entire neighborhood coming into that space, which is what, when musicians performed, the music went out into the neighborhood from those very windows. And something clicked over there. And that's when even the way we shoot changed, where Ajay and I would find a frame that included the inside and the outside. And then we would just this was the first time almost entirely the film is on a tripod. Both Ajay and I never worked with a tripod. But we would put the camera on the tripod and we would roll the camera for 5 minutes. And once that material became very, very evocative for me. Again, I didn't know why it was evocative. But once we did that in Trinity Club, then every space we went to, we shot it like that. And then I realized that we are talking about real time. We are talking about an imagined historical time. We are talking about the time outside that doesn't match the time inside. Outside is a very noisy, crowded neighborhood. But here, and we've managed to find these places that are, in a sense, cotton wrapped and preserved. So that if I wanted to pretend that we were in the 1920s, I could have. I even at one point contemplated getting into a fiction mode, because these places are just so beautiful. But so music was my aspiration. It is not what informed me. Let's just put it that way, because I'm not knowledgeable enough to have attempted a structure that matched a musical structure. But musical structure was the aspiration for me to start structuring the film differently. And then we started pulling out these little stories from all the interviews. And if you would have realized that we don't allow the story to add up. There are only fragments that keep on, so that you're constantly seeking. And my editor and I, we used to laugh at with each other, saying that we are not allowing ourselves to breathe, which means the audience won't breathe and they might just suffocate and abandon our film because, so there was some strange ideas that were motivating us, and I'm not sure I'm articulating them clearly, but yeah, music was my aspiration. It is not something that came easily to me, the musical structure.
Okay. So for me, I'll tell you what happened. So suddenly, first it was just emptiness or these empty spaces. And mostly in the afternoons, these shots are midday. And one would expect that these concerts we speak about in those days, or let's say these spaces are still active now, it's in the evening. So there was that sense of waiting already into that, built into it. Of course, there is emptiness, but is that emptiness about something which is over, or are we waiting for something that is going to happen? That suspense was held for me in a way which I like, that suspense. And then there was emptiness. At one point, the Tanpura came and went. And throughout these spaces, wherever you went, and how many ever times it kind of was a recurring motive, that thought stayed with me because the structures, in temples, they call this prana pratishtha types, where, you kind of breathe life into something. So when the Tanpura just came and went, for me, it was like, it kind of was breathing life into it, and then it went away. And then another fascinating thing I felt was that when there are these empty frames of windows looking out, or suddenly one person appears, it felt like that empty space held a sa for me. And when when a person came in, it felt like a note has happened. So I was waiting to see, is it going to build up now? Is something going to happen? And then it goes back. And like you said, these conversations, they come in and go. So for me, it felt like the word khayal kind of inspired that. Like one idea or a thought comes up, and you, in fact, in some places deliberately faded in a section of a conversation or an interview and faded it out. So for me, all this started playing in my head of saying, what if the music is sung like this? What would happen to the listener? And in the waiting also, I was wondering, is that the state of a listener? So somewhere even in the absence of everything, the listener became so alive. And I think, Teju, isn't that what this book is about? It's not just about the musicians or the talim. There is also the lover of the music, the obsessive lover of the music, who in their presence and absence become the main, one of the main reason for this work.
Right. So again, just to show the people who came in late that this is the book that Bindu is referring to, and which is the allied project of the film. These are two sort of things that we have produced. One is a film and one is a book, and they so birthed sort of together simultaneously. Yes, in a way, Bindu is right that the book is not about musicians necessarily. The book is about musicophilia, the obsession with music, the passion for music. And I think it's amazing that Surabhi's film project is completely evocative of that, but it doesn't need to name it as such. Whereas, because I'm not working with the visual element, I would have to produce a concept in the book to name the kind of feeling that you might experience when you watch a film like this, right? So in spite of the fact that the music in Surabhi's film is not represented in any linear way, there is no beginning, middle, or end. There is no sir to completion. She's invoking the returning to the sum, but you never see in the way the visual narrative goes that sort of return is never simple. It's actually, you have to wait until the very end to be able to hear that in a way that does evoke how we experience Hindustani music. So yes, the book and the film project, are both about the character that I call the Diwana. And this Diwana, is, Surabhi will remember, is a word given to us by one of our interviewees, who was a tabla repairer and who talked about how the really mad people are the ones who listen to music in the kotas, right? So the Diwana, the musicophiliac, becomes the central figure in, in my book, for example. And I think that what's common between the film project and the book project is the exploration of the space of Bombay. The fact that the music is central to the social life of Bombay and has been for nearly 150 years. The fact that there are so many spaces that music has filled, which are so brilliantly invoked, I think, by Surabhi's film and by Ajay's camera in the kind of shooting style they decided to adopt. So I think this idea that the space is very important to how music is experienced I think defines both the project of the film and the way in which I talk about musicophilia in the book. Because musicophilia is something that is very specific to the new urban, inhabitants of Bombay from the 1850s onwards. They arrive at this condition because of having newly engaged with what later came to be called Hindustani classical music, through the theater, through many, many other modes, and they get so crazy that they finally want to actually learn the music themselves. So this is what my book talks about, the passion for music.
Thank you, Teju. Surabhi, at this point, I'll just tell you that in case there is anything from the Q&A that, are you able to see the Q&A box? I'm just letting you know in case you want to sort of have an idea of that. And if there's anything that you want to respond to, you can. Otherwise, I'll kind of continue with certain other thoughts that I had when I was watching the film.
Either way, Bindu, I think maybe we can take, maybe let's take one more set of questions from you and then we can go to the...
Sure. So there were a few places where I made note of, one thing was, I think around 10 minutes, 35 seconds was, I think, speaking about spaces and walking through an area where music, a lot of musicians or talim goes on, Guru Shishya classes, everything is going on. There is a mention of that in the film. And for me, it was, it immediately took me back to the days that I used to walk through the SRA, the Sangeet Research Academy quarters in Kolkata, because, from the gate I enter and then there is Girija Devi ji's, and then Pandit Ullas Kasalkar ji, then there is Ajay Chakrabarti ji. So it goes on, and then there will be quarters of these students. By the time I reach my Guru Baba Ustad Abdul Rashid Khan place, I would have heard so many things going on, and it's an unbelievable experience. That whole place, I don't know whose voice it is or where it's coming from, or just the tanpura, somebody's tuning the tanpura or their sarod, and that was enough. Like, it would have just made my day, so yeah, I just felt like sharing that. And also, I think the way you kind of this, we can probably speak about the title in a bit. I guess it'll be interesting to know what you felt about the title and all that. But before that, see, I said there's this emptiness and then there's nostalgia. At the same time, I didn't end up feeling too much loss also. I understood erasure. So is there something more that you would like to talk about, how we kind of look at nostalgia or those bygone days? There's always that, no?
Yeah.
And that, is there dilution or enrichment? That's a question I have of, or what got left behind and what got carried on.
Yeah.
So
let me begin by what you began with, which was this sense of walking down a corridor with different musicians doing their riyaz or talim or just tuning the tanpura. And the particular, that 10 minute that you talk about, there's a story like that, and we are in Trinity Club at that point. Again, to come back to what I said about fiction, so it was very tempting to try and recreate so many of those things. And I don't necessarily need to recreate with actors, but I could have recreated that sense of sitting in Trinity Club, but hearing somebody doing Riyaz somewhere else, someone else, you know, I could have recreated that feeling very easily. In film, you can do it very easily. I had all the material to do that. And there were so many such stories that within that space, I could have recreated even just orally or, you know, and it was very tempting because the stories used to, like, just listening to these people recount these memories used to give me a high. But that was where the dilemma of getting overly nostalgic and imagining that, oh my God, that time was just so beautiful. And then the sense of that, oh, now that time has gone, would have been even greater, as if that was the golden time and this is some completely corrupted time. And I really, like, I sort of resisted because it's a completely false dichotomy. So my worry was, how do I, not worry, but my attempt was how to not get sentimental about this nostalgia. How do I hold on to a nostalgic story, but still root it in a current time where maybe we are a little ambiguous about what it means that everybody lives in the same neighborhood. You know, it's a different time. Like, it doesn't happen. We are all in different countries talking on Zoom just now, you know. So the fact that we could all have been in a single room in Bangalore having this conversation, yeah, it's beautiful, but this is what it is, right? So I had to work against that. So my relationship with nostalgia was very clear. I couldn't be sentimental about it. And that feeling of loss need not be like this cataclysmic feeling. There is a sense of loss, but there is, you know, when the singer Rutuja comes in the end to Lakshmi Bagh to think about the fact that she's heard about the space from Dhondutai and she wants to hear her voice without a microphone in the space she's heard so much about. For me, that's it. That's beautiful. That's alive. That's current. And which is why it was not concert footage that I ended up using, but that talim or that riyaz bits, because there was something up to look for. It's moving forward. It's alive.
Yes.
You know, so that particular space and that particular way of listening and singing and performing and connecting is gone. But, you know, what's the problem if there is a thriving music club in Thakur Village, which is where I live in Bombay, actually. It's one of the most, it's a very active music group that's constantly, I get WhatsApp messages from them continuously. You know, so big deal, or in Thane or wherever else. So I was constantly working against the idea of nostalgia as some golden time having gone. But equally, I wanted to talk about the fact that music itself has erased a lot of people. It has, without making it some big pamphlet that I'm going to give out like, oh my God, you know. So, which is why there are lots of stories that are there that are incomplete. And one of the things with my sound designer, when we were doing the sound design, I kept telling him, I said, you know, I don't want the story to sound complete. I want to feel like I have entered this space and overheard somebody saying something. And when you overhear, you never hear the whole thing. You know, so that was very much part of the way by everything. A friend of mine, I think she might be in the audience, she sent me an email saying, why are you such a tease in this film, you know? And she's right. The thing was, the moment I would open it out, it was becoming a description. And it was becoming more dramatic than I wanted it to be.
Wow. Okay, so what I'll do now is I'll just quickly probably just go through things that I noted down when I was kind of looking into your film, like watching the film. So the first things were, of course, the empty spaces, very obvious, and the stillness you bring in. And so there's always, it felt like you're preparing, you know. And then you started focusing on the structure, and so, and then just like tal of the khayal, you know, where the tal starts mapping time, cycles of time, frames of time rather than rhythm initially, when it's especially going in the Vilambit, that started coming in of these frames of time or frames of occurrences.
Yeah.
And you have kept the camera, and you have also kind of become a witness. There's that witnessing that happens to see if there's nothing, so be it, or if there is something, okay, or even if the little shadow which goes past became very important, you know. And that brought in that how thoughts really kind of sometimes flit in and flit out of the mind. So these started becoming, can there be frames of emptiness where you enter and go out in a different way? And then these nothingness was very filled for me. And so what happened was, yeah, the mind wonders, things, waits, and it's curious also to see what next. That's what was happening to me while I was watching these spaces through your uh, and then I had a question saying, does a musician also allow oneself to be a witness while still being a participant in the khayal process or in the singing process? You know, so I think the listener or the witnessing person was very strong in your um, film. And also in the waiting, you allowed, because you didn't interfere, you kind of didn't interfere, something happens, but there's nothing specific that happens.
Yeah. No, I did in a sense interfere because, as you notice, I've removed sound. I've removed the real ambience. When you see a train, I don't keep the train sound except in the end. I've put a Tanpura sound over there.
Right.
Or I'm looking out at you know, a vehicle pass from the door, but
Right.
I've removed the vehicle sound and kept it you know. Or I'm in a courtyard and it's bright sun and I've put rain sound. You know, I put so we've dislocated sound, and that was the intervention I made to keep preparing for this sense of these stories and these memories. You know, so yeah. So again, when we were editing, we were editing in absolute silence. We hadn't put any sound effect. And there was one point where my editor was convinced that's the only way this film should be. It should just be music, voices, and absolute silence, no ambience of any sort. I wasn't as brave as her. I said, anyway, people will feel that the shot chal bhi raha hai, you know, has it just stopped and the film stopped? I said, we remove the sound. That will be the end of it. So, and I think my sound designer and I had a lot of fun. So, yeah, I'm not totally, you know, I think your question, your comment about being a witness comes really from the fact that I'm not a music knowledgeable person. Since I'm aspiring, it would have, if I was somebody who had trained, or I'm you know, really knowledgeable about it, I have a feeling the structure would be very different. I wouldn't be constantly in this witnessing position or this listening position. So I completely got fascinated with the face of a teacher listening to the student rather than actually filming the person who is trying out the taan. You know, it was crazy. It's not as if we didn't have both the shots. Of course we did, but it was something hypnotic for me to just listen to that man who puts on the tape recorder and just listens for 2 or 3 minutes, and his face is alive. You know, so I think that comes into play. I'm just wondering, I've seen loads of questions come in. Shall we start addressing the
Yes, I'll just quickly see whether there is anything else that yeah, let's start taking, and in case there's a gap, I'll
Okay. So thanks, Indu. Indu says you haven't reduced it to literality. Yes, really, I think Teju and I were really talking a lot about how to not get descriptive and literal. It was so beautiful to actually even describe. So it meant a lot of holding back, and many people might not agree that the holding back was needed, and I totally get that point. But yeah, that is what we were trying to do. And Sudha says, if not sentimental, can nostalgia ever be devoid of affect as a form of memory? Not at all. In fact, for me, even a fragment of these stories would sort of leave me just like completely, in another zone, which is why then I started stretching out further. Like one sentence has been spoken about how we would go up and we would walk down and we would hear this and we would hear that. After that, I couldn't follow it up with another story for a while. I could only stay in that space. So I was attempting some kind of, to retain the affect. Natasha says, I like the idea of nostalgia without sentiment. It's a wonderful approach. Thank you. Not sure it fully works, but thank you. I love the voices of the daughters, women who grew up in the hood. Gently suggest not run. Thank you. Sushma is saying, could you please talk about nostalgia in the context of the sale auction sequence? So the sale, I don't know if everybody was able to identify. There's this one particular place which is not empty, which has a lot of people. And that is Jinnah Hall. And Jinnah Hall has become the space for these auctions that happen. The person who runs these auctions is actually the person who is in charge of Congress House now. And he sends me these emails every 3 months. They collect furniture from all these embassies and stuff, and they auction. And there's fabulous stuff there, by the way, and all kinds of stuff, printers, all kinds of things happening over there. And that space, I kept trying to shoot it when it was empty. I had actually shot a little bit when it was empty, but I kept going there. And then there was once I just said, okay, let's just shoot this and then we'll go back, because it made no sense that there were these sofas covered with plastic and this, that, and the other. But then again, when you're looking at that material, I just said, my editor said, she says, the shock of seeing people in this space is something we need to bring into the film. And people who are not there to listen to music, who are there for a totally different activity. So actually it was my editor who said, we absolutely need to bring it in, and at like around 3/4 of the film. Because by then you've got so used to empty spaces and no people, you're not seeing people. So this comes as a bit of a shock. So I don't know what relationship it had with nostalgia, because the story that we've kept in that place is particularly beautiful. But yeah, I don't know, Sushma, how to answer you. I don't know what it was doing, but it felt correct to us. I hope that...
Can I then say something here?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Because you brought the idea of people. That so the other section here was the classes, the class session which Lalit Rao ji takes.
Yeah.
So I just, yeah, of course there are 2-3 other sections of also this Guru Shishya Talim going on. So what was it like, this particular section?
Lalit Rao ji's music session was filmed at a much later stage, and I think by then I had begun editing already. So this sense of staying with the listener and staying with static camera was already had become some kind of a pattern. And so when we reached there, and suddenly we had all these 8 people. This particular sequence was shot by another very fantastic cinematographer whom I worked with a lot, Avijit Mukul Kishore. And I remember telling him that, listen, I want to stay with the listener. So if the teacher is singing, we'll stay with the student. And when the student is singing, we'll stay with the teacher. What we weren't prepared for was the structure of the class. Where she wanted to get everybody to improvise, and they were all sitting in a bit of a semicircle. And I was getting completely ruffled as to how do we now stick to this static camera, because otherwise it was a very wide frame and everybody sitting in this semicircle. It wasn't working. So then I told Mukul, I said, okay, just respond. Like, this is what I'm going for, but I really don't know how to make it work over here. And so what he did was, and we have different renditions, but the one, this particular shot, as you notice, he is on Lalitji when she sings, and then he moves to the next person who is listening and then starts singing, and then he moves to the next person who is listening. And so I had, and again, like seeing people in the auction, this became the first time that the camera moved, really. And again, that had to be used very carefully. So if we are sort of starting the music with this very, tehrav, there is a moment where it has to suddenly start breathing. And actually, these are the few places where the film starts breathing. As somebody said, once it started breathing, why did you again go back to the sound? I was like, now what to do?
Okay, so maybe you want to scroll down further.
First, thank you, Freeze 2508. The absence of titles during the film. One didn't know who was speaking and what the space was. So yes, it's always, and I've intended to take that decision to sort of keep, it is unsettling, I know. Many of my films, I have not named people or the spaces. Often I sort of just let that go. So what happens when you name a space, I feel that it is then my responsibility to tell you about that space. And once I start telling you about that space and the history, geography of that space, then the film goes into a very different mode. So instead, so I know it's unsettling. Like if I say this is Ruby Hall, then there will be people who know what Ruby Hall is, but then most people, it begs the question, so what is the significance of Ruby Hall? And then I get into an informational mode. So I did take the decision of then naming everybody and the spaces at the end, which is not very helpful, but it is basically to sort of hold back from making this a descriptive informational film. So it's a complicated thing.
That question I was sharing with Teju also, you know what? So this thing of not naming, and there are voices. And there are voices talking about their past. Already, so there is a lot of time of, already it's like you're talking to someone who is talking about their experience, and it goes on saying, unhone bola or whatever, it just like keeps going like that. So when you are learning probably any kind of a traditional art form, what comes with it is the sense of invisible voices, or they also. I felt that, and this film kind of really made me realize that, saying, my God, it's never about just my engagement to what is going on in just this moment, yes, and not just about what I have learned in terms of the technicality or the raga or the tala. There seems to be the presence of all these unheard voices, unsaid things also, and this film really caught that for me. So
no,
I thought,
it was also a response to the fact that there were many things Teju and I really wanted said, but people weren't willing to say it. The whole erasure of the Kalavant community in Girgaon and in music, not because the people have disappeared, because it's not an identity that is necessarily something everybody wants to talk about. Now, it was very easy for Teju and me to bring that into the film. But that is then stating out, how can I, how can I create that sense of things that are said, unsaid? And it's okay if everybody doesn't get it. If you just get a suggestion from a voice that says, we only had grandmothers, we never knew our grandfathers, you know, it's ambiguous, but I feel in that ambiguity, it manages to hold more nuance than if I was to state, this community has got erased, this community has taken over music. You know, it's a very it's a very strange way of representing very complex kind of processes.
Yeah, so that idea of, you know, an idea having a completion of being completely defined to the khayal, like a thought, it could come take shape or not. That was also brilliant. And I think now if you ask Vinita Lal's question.
Moving the music gave the spaces more gravitas and filled it with nostalgia and memories without getting too saccharine. Thank you. The few bits of music seem to come in as contrast with the cacophony outside. Is that what you meant by Phir Se Sampe Aana? How did the name come about? Okay. So the bits of music that are there were actually for us the moments where the film again breathes, where you know you're not tense. The film is makes you very tense. I realized even while making it, and every time I see it. How did the name come about? So in fact, Bindu was part of that conversation. So I was playing around with titles, and there is that lovely story that Dhundutai speaks about in the film, where her teacher tells her that you have come 5 minutes late. If you reach the sum 5 minutes late, is that okay? So I was sort of playing around with some. I said I want that to be in the title, and we were all. So I had actually messaged Teju saying, you know, I'm working with the idea of some. So how now I don't remember the different options we had. Teju might remember. But it was in a conversation, so Teju and Bindu and Omkar and Rutuja were together. This is the musician part of the project that we are working on now. And this discussion, I think, happened in Teju's living room with these people. And that's where that Phir Se Sampe Aana came as the title. Teju, if you want to recount exactly how that happened.
I mean, now it doesn't matter, right? It's how you remember it. I remember it as just simply like a phone conversation, or maybe it was on WhatsApp, and saying that, you know, what happens when you return, and because this idea of the cycle, the rhythmic cycle, is extremely important in Hindustani music, and we weren't sure whether to actually frame it in this way. So I talked to my current teacher, Omkar Havaldar, and who's part of our other project, and he said, yeah, it should probably work. And then I sent you the English translation, and then we struggled over the two language thing. And then, yeah, this sounds fine. So then finally, when I wrote, just to plug my book again, when I wrote the concluding chapter, I ended with the film and a discussion of the film, saying that because it's a book about music, it makes sense then to return to the first beat. So in a way, this title was the most appropriate one for the film, but also became central to how I imagined the structure of my book as well.
Yeah. Okay. So there's also Supraja asking, could Tejaswini speak of what pulled her percepts and scholarship through that of looking at migrant music in the Caribbean in one of her earlier books, to that of the evolution of Hindustani in Mumbai, of this audio-visual archive that her conceptualizations figure? Are you able to see that question, Teju?
Yeah, I've seen the question, and it's a pretty complex one.
Okay.
So to make it intelligible for everyone, I'll just stick to maybe 2 or 3 elements. Thank you for that question, Supraja. So in a sense, and I've talked about this in the introduction to my book. So again, Supraja, if you would, if you're following my writing, then this is a book that you should be definitely looking at. It's available in an Indian edition if you're here, or in the American edition, which is also easily available. So in the introduction, I've said this, so I'll just very briefly mention it, that the earlier occasion on which Surabhi and I collaborated, so this is not just a book project, it is also a film project. We worked together trying to film music in the Caribbean, the musical culture of the Caribbean. So in a sense, whatever archive was built there was not just through my cassette collection. This was in the 90s, right? We had cassettes. So it was partly through my cassette and much later CD collection. But not only through that, it was through the live tracking of the archive that Surabhi and I built together while shooting the film. So in a sense, talking about musical archives, that was the archive that finally defined how both the book and the book, which is called Mobilizing India, and Women, Migration and Music Between India and Trinidad, and the film Jahaji Music, India and the Caribbean. These again were parallel projects, and while they look totally different, they actually drew on the same archive of popular music in the Caribbean. And you might say then, what brought you from thinking about popular music in the Caribbean to Hindustani classical music? And I think that what being in the Caribbean helped me to do, and I did that work over 10 years, that I was able to really dismantle that simple opposition between high culture and low culture, between that which was classical and that which was popular. So for me, what I found in the Caribbean was music. And I asked the questions about social and cultural formations, about the politics of the Caribbean, as it was played out in many ways in the music. And I think the film Jahaji Music also addresses that question. So bizarrely, that was a time when we were shooting the film in the Caribbean. I had barely gotten into studying Hindustani music. And in a sense, when I came back to India and thought about what I might be thinking about next in terms of my research activity, it seemed obvious that I would be working on Hindustani music. So it was in many ways, I hate to use the word natural, but in quotation marks, a natural slide from my concern with the Caribbean and its music to my own practice, because I got very interested in even in the Caribbean as to how practice defined the way certain questions got to be asked. So the interest in musical practice, I think, defined that slide or the transition to Hindustani music, because I saw myself as a very, very amateur practitioner of Hindustani music at the time. But then I thought, what happens? Because the book, which the person who asked the question would know, the original book, Mobilizing India, is about how can you take questions which are from the subaltern Indian diaspora to reflect back on certain questions in India about femininity, about the formation of the woman question, about culture, about politics, and so on, about even the question of the nation. So in a sense, I asked myself, what might it mean to take these questions and actually bring them back into India and say, so what has changed for me in being able to tackle these questions, to ask similar questions, maybe about a very different archive. And again, this archive of Hindustani music, we built through the film. So the archive is not simply the discrete items of musical memory or just the particular performances of different ragas and so on, but it's also all the material that Surabhi and I gathered as we made the film, as we shot the film. So this archive includes not just the musical note, but also the spaces, also the people's memories, and the way they think about music. So this is how I think it made sense for someone interested in migration, in women and music, to move from thinking about the Caribbean to thinking about India.
Wow. And yes, so it's very interesting for me to have watched the film and parallelly read the books, because they are kind of complementing each other or sets the mind thinking in two different ways. Ramani, thank you. He says, I felt in the absence, the presence resonates, and in the presence, the hidden resonates. And Surabhi, Farid Ahmed's question.
Yeah, I was
about which one? Your film experience, that one?
The structure question. Did you fix your
there's one if you also what I would recommend is at 6:41 there's one more question.
So,
if you scroll down, so you can look at both, and then it's from the same person, Farid Ahmed.
The question about your film experience beyond sense and nonsense, something, that one.
Yeah.
Okay. So
I mean, I thought somewhere these two.
Yeah.
You answer.
Even I wanted to respond to that. So thanks, Farid. About the style, the style, I never know the style or the form before I start the film. This film, even during the research, I really did not know. For the longest time, I wasn't sure there would be a film. I would keep telling Teju that, let's treat this as a documentation project. And in the course of the documentation and making this archive, we did a series of video art installations, which was just fantastic experience for me, which is another reason possibly the film shaped up the way it did, because it dislodged me from that forming a structure from the beginning to the end. But when I was finally, actually by then I decided there would be no film. I had created a 1 hour long, like a structure to show all my research, show off my research for the funders. And actually even that is a very nice film, if you call it a film. It's a very descriptive kind of film. But at that point, I suddenly felt that I knew I wanted to make a longer film. And that's when the style of the film emerged. When I was taking those 5-minute shots on a tripod in these empty spaces, I still didn't know what I would be doing with it. So it was the structure, the style really emerged on the editing table. And that's pretty much the way I work all the time. It's my research that starts telling me the form and the style of the film. When I begin like empty, actually. About the second question, you also said overhearing sound. I'm not fully sure I understood your question. What is sense to you become the nonsense for me as an audience? Absolutely, it might. I'm not sure whether I know what sense is or what nonsense is. So I'm not sure I fully understood the question, but the audience is not necessarily going to get what is going on in my head. And they might actually reject whatever is going on in my head. And that's perfectly acceptable and fine. Overhearing sound effect, I'm not sure I've understood. But what motivated you to create this atmosphere? I don't know if it is philosophical. What motivated you is what I was been talking about. My response to the material we had collected and my response to these spaces. That's from where the film emerged. And this particular film, it's highly likely that it doesn't speak to somebody in the audience. It's perfectly possible. Wanted to music, let the film breathe. Thank you, Vinita. When am I planning to release it in theaters? No theater is willing to take films like this. Anubhav, thank you for the question, but theaters don't, it's another world out there, and clearly we don't belong in that world. Tushita is asking, what's the music scene like in Girgaon now? And can you talk about, well, as of now, that neighborhood itself is emptied out. Most of the music practitioners have moved out into other areas. And all these music clubs, that was a vibrant scene in Dadar, Matunga, Girgaon, that whole area, have moved further north in the city. So they're alive and well. So which is why I don't want to romanticize. It's beautiful in Girgaon that it was literally that entire neighborhood you can walk around within 45 minutes and have touched the houses and performance spaces of the entire history of Hindustani classical music from the 20s to the 40s. But that space is now transformed. So many of the buildings are gone. The metro has come there, so the place is dug up. So Girgaon has emptied out, although some of the places exist as like the other music school still exists and as a music school, but the rest of the places have become shadi halls or a space for this auction or whatever else. So it's just moved north in Bombay.
Okay. Sorry. There's one right at the end, but before that, I thought at this point I can also ask you something.
Yeah.
So there is that little room. I think that was like a Riaz room that you kept revisiting.
The little room is the one with the mirrors, because that's Trinity.
There's a mirror, and then there is this cupboard and then there's a Tanpura arena.
Yeah. That is Trinity Club. It's not a Riyaz room. It's a room in a chawl where from the 20s onwards, Teju will be able to speak better about it. People used to come and stay there. People would come to Bombay for recordings or for performances. And then invariably they would end up holding performances in that room. And the stories, and this went on till the 50s or the 60s actually, no, maybe even the 70s. But one has heard of stories of, absolute greats performing and the entire neighborhood and the street below filled with people listening into the wee hours of the morning. And it's a really tiny one-room chawl. So that's the space. Teju?
So, no, I just want to say that Surabhi is even older than you think. It was started in 1907.
Sorry.
Under the patronage of Bhaskar Bua Bakle, who died some time after, and obviously has gone through many avatars. And when we interviewed Bala Sahib Tikekar, he was talking about a much later phase of the club, where many people would just come in from the neighborhood and sing to each other and so on. Whereas earlier it was for the visiting musicians coming from out of Bombay.
Yeah. Okay.
So sorry, what is your question about Trinity Club?
No. There wasn't really a question of sorts. I really liked the way you kept coming back, and it also felt like you had a special something for it, like it was your pet.
Of course.
And also, if you scroll down completely to the end, there seems to be a question from Prashant.
Yeah, I'm reading
147. Yeah.
Hi Prashant. So Prashant is asking, how do you approach a subject people practice, place which you are in love with? Do you think our fascination with nostalgia for tradition prevents us from being more critical of it? Possibly, but I'm not. So again, I'm an outsider to the love, as in I came into this not because I loved music and the place of Girgaon in history. It was through the research that I came to this. So I'm not sure it was what I was in love with. And I definitely I came from a position of being critical, actually. So I began with this idea of, why has Girgaon transformed? Why has it emptied out? And it, as I said, it's not necessarily a good or a bad thing. So so I actually came from that space. And again, I'm outside of this Guru Shishya Parampara, and as you can imagine, being an outsider to it makes one somewhat unsure about it. But for me, the reason why I kept the sequences of music was really about the talim primarily, was because I found within that relationship a way in which music lives that was different from the spaces that I was documenting. Music did not live in those spaces anymore. Music was gone from those neighborhoods. Ganpati pandals in Girgaon no longer have Kishori Amonkar singing, or any of the greats singing. So I have no judgment about that. What I was, and when you're talking about caste, what was difficult for me to address, because people within that, my interviews were not willing to name it as such. I'll give you an example of what got left out that was very important to understand. One of the spaces where all those paintings are, with the blue background, it's called Brahman Samaj, and it still exists, and it's beautifully maintained, and all of that. I would keep going, asking them for permission to film, and they were unsure, because they said, when I explained my project, they said music never happened here. And they kept insisting music never happened here. Only religious functions and the Brahman Samaj meetings happen over here. And I know for a fact that music happened there. Not just that music happened, music practitioners who are absolutely outside of the Brahman Samaj were performing there at religious functions. Now, how do I bring this into the film? I kept trying to get them to say it, or get somebody who was a practitioner or who remembers listening to music there to say it. And it just wasn't being said. So then what I did was show you the faces of the people who were there. And in that space is where I brought the memory of this woman's voice who speaks in English, who says, we had no grandfathers. And we performed in every space in Girgaon. Our grandmothers performed over here. So that is how I sort of brought this sense of, I don't know if it's discomfort, but disconnect of stories. So there was a constant disconnect of stories that had to be brought in and not pointed out. A lot of it can be missed. I definitely did not see myself as upholding this Guru Shishya Parampara as this sacred relationship. But I did think it brought an affect into the space that is empty. That was interesting. So I don't know if I answer all your questions, but yeah, I definitely came from a space of being critical and how to bring it into the film without pointing fingers and underlining things, if that helps. Yeah.
Because it was about Guru Shishya, that's what in the 17th minute I was asking Surabhi, I was curious, generally the teacher and the student kind of sit, at least that's how my talim went, where we're facing each other. And Sina Basina, I mean, the belief in the transmission also somewhere, from this being to that being is there. But in that frame, the teacher and student were not sitting facing each other. So I kind of suddenly felt like there was an intervention, I mean, of course, any film in any way is an intervention. There is a presence of the third, the camera but here I was like, that didn't feel very Surabhi-like also. So I was curious, and I did ask you also that.
No, so again, I don't fully remember, but I remember it was a very awkward place to shoot in, because it's a tiny room with a very big bed in the middle. So there was no space on the floor for two people to sit amne samne. So the teacher was sitting on the bed and the student was sitting on the side. And then there was no place for us to put the camera. So we might have changed the angle of the teacher a little bit. I don't fully remember, just so that it was also a room with very little light.
Mm-hmm.
But it was not the right kind of space to begin with. So when we came into that space, the teacher and student were in any case not sitting at the same level facing each other. So so there would have been, we do tweak things around a little just for helping us with light, but it wasn't, we set our frame according to the space.
I found that to be extremely fascinating, because when one is just watching it, your mind is, even if the frame is empty, your mind is not. It's kind of so you're with that, and so many things I could reflect on during that, for every section in fact. And even the subtle shift focus that was happening between the teacher and the plant behind him in the window, and then coming back. So suddenly, even for me, the approach to a raga kind of started. I was questioning, like, where does one bring your attention? What details do you then start looking at, and what are the nuances? So my mind was parallelly going in on a trail like that. So every frame, especially in the second watch, I remember telling Teju, the first time I watched it, I told her it's a very installation kind of a piece. I said, I did remember saying that to Teju, but this time it was completely filled for me, the whole experience of watching it. So
no, in fact, that particular shot, so we have him doing talim with the student and constantly telling us stories. So it's a very long interview. Again, shot in like we were really in a bit of a corner. The part that I used where this entire when the talim was happening, it's also a way of the cinematographer listening. So, because we were on a tripod, fixed frame, I didn't want to move around too much. The only thing we could play with was the shift focus. So, so basically, so the cinematographer was also interacting with what was happening, and that led the shift focus. So I actually used there were parts where it was neatly there without any shift focus, both, doing what they're doing. But I just found this interaction between the cinematographer and these two people immersed in music very, very powerful. So I used that section.
Wow. And even the other section where the rag is Kedar, he's sitting with his harmonium and singing, and there's that view of the beach.
Yeah.
Fantastic. That was a very beautiful moment, like others. Uma has something. I've not been able to read it fully, but
Where is it?
if you where are you now? You have to scroll up.
Down. It's
Scroll.
Before Prashant, before. Up.
Go up. It's under Vinita Lal. Timing is 6:58 p.m.
My timing is different.
Oh, sorry. Acha, it says congratulations Surabhi and Teju. The film was yeah, got it.
Got it. Thank you, Uma. Took me a while to get into the film, and it's smooth and what it's attempting to do. I completely understand that. I was especially looking, or rather hearing, what you would do with sound. I love the many beautiful touches with sound. Muting the singer when we see her singing in the hall, and hear her later when she herself starts listening. The pressure cooker, when the Rasik is listening. The pressure cooker sound when the Rasik is listening is not us. It was there. But that gave us the cue, actually. That gave us the cue to start messing around with sound. Will there be another film? More than another film, Uma, actually, again, I think it's a good time to state it. All our research interviews are available on Padma, unedited. They are fully raw, they're there. PAD.MA, the name of the project is Mumbai Music. So if you just do PAD.MA Mumbai Music, you will reach there. Uma, you're making me confess something, that the fact that a lot of stories still remain hidden, even in this material and in this film, is really, really tempted me to start around 3 years ago, start trying to write out a fiction script set in Girgaon, set in the 20s to the 40s, and especially looking at women. There's this fantastic interview that we have with this historian Anjali Arondekar, and that interview is the basis for wanting me to complete that script. It has not happened, but I don't know if it will. I hope maybe someday.
Yeah.
Yes,
Bittu, may I address the question raised by Shibani Rangaraj, which is directly addressed to me?
Okay, yes, please.
So lovely, Shibani, to find out that you live next door to Lakshmi Bagh. That's a beautiful house, and in fact, we went to look at it from the outside, Anjani Bai Malpekar's house. I don't know if you know, but the Surabhi has a very large number of shots of Muzaffarabad Hall, the complete ruin that keeps reappearing in the film, where Anjani Bai Malpekar had a debut performance in the early 20th century. So that's just a note. And thanks to those of you who have ordered my book as well. I hope you enjoy it. And I hope you'll see how you have to read the book and watch the film, and watch the film and read the book. Like, they go together. Similarly, Shivani has brought up the exhibition that we collaborated on along with some others in 2015. It's called Making Music, Making Space. And in that exhibition, we had the video installations that we spoke about. And we also had, maps of the neighborhood, interactive maps. We had a whole bunch of other things. And so, yes, to the question, I have talked about Making Music, Making Space in the last chapter of the book. Again, the book is not a documentation of that exhibition, but it refers to that and has some still images from that as well.
Okay. Did that Thank you, Teju. Okay, Shibani has also said thank you. So I think we've sort of covered a lot of things.
There's one
there's
last question.
Vidya?
Vidya Gopal.
Yes, that
Did you
was the
want
one.
to take that?
Sorry?
Did anyone in the interviews mention what were the series of events in history that made music fade away from the area? Would you?
I'm sorry, I'm not getting it. Where is it?
It's under Shibani's question. Vidya Gopal.
Okay. I also want to thank Rohini for being here and helping us with our earlier project. I didn't know, Rohini, that you lived for your first 3 years in Girgaon. That's lovely. I'm so glad you enjoyed our film. Shibani. No, I don't see.
No, so above Rohini,
Oh,
there's.
yes, I found it, yeah. Did anyone in the interviews mention what were the series of events in history that made music fade away from the area? I don't think that all the material we know or we have comes only from the interviews, because I've been researching this and reading from the secondary literature. Yes, in the interviews, some people did speak about it. In fact, actually, Rutuja's parents lived in Girgaon. Rutuja Lad, who's also here in the audience and one of our collaborators. Her parents lived there, and it seems as though that part of the reason why the music, sort of left Girgaon eventually, very, very slowly, is because the people who lived there started migrating to the suburbs. Of course, Dadar Matunga benefited from that large-scale migration to the suburbs that began happening very early on when the Dadar Matunga area got developed. But I think the final emptying out of Girgaon's music happens around the 80s and 90s. I think Arvind Parikh talks about this in his books as well. And he, I think, mentioned that to me in the interview that you'll find on Padma. I can't remember if anyone else explicitly talked about it, but this is a well-known fact that, and I think that we infer the reasons from the internal migrations that Bombay is witness to. And as Surabhi mentioned earlier, then you find all these music clubs in the suburbs, and you find that people don't want to travel long distances to come and listen to concerts in town. So I think the satellite cities start developing their own musical cultures. So you have multiple musical cultures in Bombay eventually, and not just what emanated from Girgaon in the late 19th century and the early 20th. Yeah.
Wow. And wow. So I think we can probably, are there more questions or anything that Surabhi or Teju want to say? Otherwise, I'll also kind of say a few things and we can move towards winding up.
Yeah, Teju, if you'd like to.
No, I just want to say, watch this space. We'll be coming back with Surabhi's new film on our India-China musical collaboration.
And yeah, I will say, just like Freeze, and I'm also looking forward to the fiction from Surabhi.
Yeah.
And I want to kind of add that somewhere subconsciously, watching this film in this time of what's going on in the world, with all of us, with what we think of structures, what remains, what fades away, what recurs, I think it had a different impact in my view on how I viewed the film. I definitely, even if it was not a conscious thing, somewhere it had its effect. And so that whole thing about from gross to subtle, in terms of a structure to musical structures, to just the music or the note, I kind of was looking at a lot of those abstractions, and it made a deep impact on me on that level also, Surabhi, this film.
No, thanks, Bindu. I think your observations are very precious, because, as I said, for me, to hear somebody from within music to respond, because I don't know whether I was able to reach there. But again, I want to come back to that question of when did you know your style. So we the fiction or intervention thing that we did was ask Rutuja to come to Lakshmi Bagh. And I had an idea that because it's not as if we found her there. She came all the way from Borivali specially because we requested, and she came over there. Although she performed there in a program that we had helped put together. And I have that footage. But when she came there alone, and the only thing she said is, I want to test my voice here. And when she did that, and my sound recordist is just, he's a magician. So that sound that he got, that was different from when we were speaking in that hall. That actually is what somehow I said, okay, how do we in film deal with this? You know, how do I hear this? How do I create a vessel in which I can hear this sound? And that sort of, so it did address the question of nostalgia, but Rutuja didn't come from a position of only nostalgia. It wasn't just because her teacher's teacher used to perform there. It was also a question of technique. She wanted to hear her voice in the space that had made music the way it was. And so much going on in that moment that it just, that's why I froze. For 2 years, I think Teju was a little worried that nothing is going to happen of this film, because I froze. I didn't know, it was too big a project. It was too scary to handle. So. Yeah.
So about Lakshmi Bak, sorry, the last thing, Raghu, sorry.
No problem.
Actually, I have performed there once during the Kabir festival. They managed to get one, because when that, in the moment, I was enjoying Rutuja's section so much. And then I was like, why did I have to mic when I sang there? You know, I didn't want to, but we realized that the traffic around is quite a bit, and we had to really be heard over and above that. So that kind of brought me to reality, that because I was like, this is too beautiful. And so that was there about Lakshmi Bag.
Which is why afternoon, we had to go to Lakshmi Bag in the afternoon.
Okay, I wanted to add just what I can't find it anymore. Vidya had said something about thanking you for the tehrav that this film brought in. Vidya is also a singer. Okay, so she said that this film really brought in a lot of tehrav, and that restlessness, or how much life gets muddled up. You know, this film really, even for me, it happened that, you know, what if you just enter a rag or anything like a space, and walk as if you're in a museum looking at a painting, stay with it, then move. You know, that this film really helped me center back and slow down. So thank you so much, Teju and Surabhi, for something so precious. So that's my thank you note. And Raghu.
Thank you so much, Bindu, Surabhi, and thank you, audiences, for joining us on a Sunday evening. We hope to see you here again.
Last thing, that this film, if you want to watch it,
yes, the film is going to be on our website for the next couple of days till the next Wednesday. So if you haven't seen it and you would like to watch it, please do. You can go to our website and watch the film online. Thank you again. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, BIC. Thank you,
BIC. Thank you, TFA. Thank you.